There he is.
Hey, long time no see. How are you?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm fascinated by your rock and roll roots.
You are you? Well, it's I could tell you this story. It's not a very long one. It's a very simple one. Um,
You went with you traveled. You went with a lot of cool bands.
yeah, I've been around the world with them. Saw Kiss when I was 10 years old in the 70s and told my mom that's what I was going to do. And that's what I did. So I was
And
very,
I,
very happy and lucky.
I know, you said you have a young man working next door to you, basically next. So obviously your wife let you do that traveling too. So God,
Listen, she's got an even more interesting story. Depends on she's the one with the talent in the family, right? I had some luck and some hard work, but she's a dancer and she wanted to dance and she was young, so she was a professional dancer um, for many years, for probably about 15 years. So she traveled while I traveled. She was doing shows in Bermuda and Vegas and Bahamas and Tahoe and all that stuff, and while I was doing my thing. So we've both had a very interesting life. We're still on our first jobs, I guess, and no end in sight, I suppose. She's a yoga teacher now because you can only dance for so long, right, before your body breaks down. So
I'm on about my fifth job, but it's my second act in the hobby. And I mean, I'm very lucky at my age to have gotten a second act back in the hobby.
well, I will ask you about that once we get going. So that's because I've listened to you across many platforms. So I don't like to rehash things because many people listen to you've been, same with Dr. Jim. You guys have been fortunate to commit your time to many people, which is great. But I want to go over the more interesting stuff. So there's some holes in your story, Rich Klein, that we'll get to. Uh,
Yes, well, I'll get to the holes, and some of them are interesting, and some of them are fascinating, and some of them are
right.
just boring and like.
Yeah. Right. So that's one of the things is when I talk about my job is I don't like to talk about it. You have a unique job. I have a unique job. I don't, when you're in a room full of people that have normal jobs, it's a lot of effort. You're more of an extrovert than I am, but it's a lot of effort to kind of explain what you do and stuff like that because they can't fathom it. What do you mean you don't go to an office and file reports all day, right?
Right. Well, I have a friend of mine, and he's gotten older, but he was head of the Columbia Alumni Committee for many years here. And they always said, and he was a high-powered attorney. He did contract law.
Uh-huh.
They all worked together. He goes, you may have made less money, but your job's a lot more fun than mine.
Yeah, isn't that
He always
crazy?
told people, now if you like sports or you had like sports cards, he had a dream job. You don't.
Yeah. I mean, we've been lucky. I mean, I've done a lot of things in sports with my job, which is pretty cool. I mentioned something on Twitter the other day. I was the guy who, when Cal Ripken broke the record 21-31, I'm the one who flicked the lights and up on the banners that were on the Camden Yards wall. So I was there for that, which is kind of a cool thing. And then, various other things. I'll tell you a quick story about the 1997 basketball All-Star game. It was the year they unveiled the 50 greatest players of all time. So in my little area, uh, waiting to be introduced was I lucked out and had the centers, right? So at that point, only two
You have
people weren't
Shaq,
there.
you have Kareem, you have Wilt, you have Bill Russell.
Yeah,
Was
but
Lee
the
Thurman one of the 50?
well, I'll tell you, the two people that weren't there were Pistol Pete because he passed away, and Shaq because he feigned injury or he had an injury, who knows? But it was Wilt, uh, Moses, Bill Russell, George Mikan was there, and they're
Yes.
all wearing their, Elijah was there. They're all wearing their jackets for their teams, which was pretty cool. The varsity jackets, and it was pretty cool seeing that. And then there was another point at that show or that event where I was walking around the tunnels underneath and I come around a corner and there's a bunch of TV cameras and Magic Johnson and dozens of reporters facing me, looking at me, and I'm, with the lights blaring, and I turn around and look, and 10 feet behind me was Jordan, and I was like a Jordan Magic sandwich there, and it was I'd love to find footage of that, but it's stuff like that where you just pinch yourself. So
And I did stat at the U.S. Tennis Open for 7 years.
What era was that? Was that the Arthur Ashe or McEnroe, Borg, all that stuff?
It was the McEnroe Lendl era.
Okay.
Lendl was in 8 straight finals,
Yeah,
82 to
amazing.
89,
Amazing.
which is just astonishing stat.
Was he an American at that point, or was he still a Czech? Was he a Czech?
He became an American citizen sometime during that.
Gotcha.
And I mean, he was a machine. He was
Yeah.
a wonderful. I loved watching him play just because he was so good.
Right.
Not because he was flashy. He was just so good.
Wow, man.
And McEnroe was, had the poetic touch. And the last one I did was the Sampras Agassi. The last match I did was the Sampras Agassi final in 1990. I actually did that match, packed for 3 days, and I had already gotten the job at Beckett. I had done some work in August.
Uh-huh.
3 days after the U.S. Tennis Open, I'm usually, so I'm packing while I'm like half dead because those are really tiring times.
Yeah.
And I pack and I drive down to Texas the following Thursday and begin work 1 week after the tennis open.
Oh, really? Wow. That's crazy, man. That's crazy. That's I mean, tennis enjoyed, I don't watch boxing now, but boxing was the same way. 70s, 80s. There were some amazing things going on, right? Tennis enjoyed, between Borg and then Connors and then McEnroe and Lendl and Agassi and Sampras. It's amazing the streak that they had, right? For especially the US Open, I guess. That was where the big battles happened.
Well, boxing and tennis have the same problem. Even track and field have this problem. Track and field gets interesting every 4 years during the Olympics. When I'm going to say you're my age, give or take.
I'm 53, so we're both born in the 60s.
You're a few years younger than I am, but you're close enough where you remember when, I'm going to use the term shared experience.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have cable. You probably didn't have cable until you were 14, 15.
Not till I moved out of the house in my 20s, Rich.
Okay, so you didn't have cable growing up.
Right.
So you're watching the same programs everybody else is watching. And the networks in those days and the sports programs, they did feature boxing.
Right.
They did feature track and field. They did feature tennis. Now I'm, if baseball. And my cable network took away MLB Network last year.
Huh.
That one I understand because the contract came up like in July and there was no guarantee there's a baseball season.
Right.
So if they wanted more money, there's no guarantee there's a season, bye-bye. That,
sure. Yeah.
On a business level, I get that.
Yeah.
2 months later, the Bally, what's now Bally, which used to be Fox Sports West, went away.
Wow.
So I have to hope there's a game on like FS1 or Fox or something like that.
Right.
Because I can't watch baseball. And to make it worse, I have Sirius XM in my car. Well, this year, unless I want to pay MLB net, MLB.TV, the exorbitant money. This year, it costs more money with my Sirius XM to listen to baseball.
That's a shame.
Baseball is making it impossible to watch baseball.
It's amazing. And I'm in Philadelphia, so that's the home of Comcast, and Comcast has always made it difficult because they own the rights to the Phillies, the Sixers, the Flyers. They've always made it difficult. I have DirecTV. I'm a DirecTV person. And you can't watch Phillies games or Flyers games or Sixers. And they've held on to that for many decades, and it's ridiculous. I grew up probably in the same boat you did. I listened to games all the time, Richie Ashburn and Harry Callis. And that Sunday, I lived for Sunday when you would guarantee to see a game on UHF, right? That's what we saw it on UHF. I don't know what it was like where you were.
I was in New York.
So was that 9 or 11 or whatever?
9 and 11. We had a decent amount of Mets and Yankee games.
Right.
And we also had the game of the week on NBC.
Yeah.
So then ABC had Monday Night Baseball for a few years. Yep. So we had not a ton, but we had a decent amount of baseball to watch.
Right.
So it was not so bad growing up.
Yeah, we had the Prism was the cable company in Philly, and the UHF, I think it was Channel 29 at the time. It's now Fox, but back then it was independent, and they would televise the road games. So, you're talking about like 10:35 starts in San Diego or Los Angeles or San Francisco. Those are the games you'd stay up or try to stay up late to see. Otherwise, you're listening on the radio.
Yeah.
But that's what led to, I think that's our imagination took hold because we would paint the game in our minds when we're listening to them on the radio, right?
And you had Harry Callis, and in New York I had Lindsey Nelson, Bob Murphy, and Ralph Kiner doing the Mets game. And
Ralph Kiner was awesome. Yeah.
And the scooter, Phil Rizzuto and Fran
Scooter.
Healy and Bill White and Frank.
Bill White. Yeah. Bill White was great. I thought he was great.
Had enough decent people. So it was, as I said, it was not terrible in those days.
Right. Well, I'm going to get going here because I don't want to hold you up. I could talk to you for hours.
Oh, that's okay. That's
Hopefully
okay.
I will in the future.
I'm signed out as off-site meeting. I don't really care. I'm
getting all right. So I will have done the intro and I will do an outro as well. Eventually, you're not going to hear you can hear that if you want to listen, but it's just my normal nonsense. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to welcome you and then we'll get going. It's going to be, there's no format. I do have bullet points, but it's just stuff that I want to ask you that I'm curious about.
That's fine. Let me do one thing real quickly. It's just a stupid thing, but I realize that if I have AOL on while I'm talking to you, I'll hear the beep, and I don't want to hear.
That's a nice AOL address you have there, Saber, huh?
Yeah, I couldn't get Saber Rich or something like that, so I just became Saber Geek, and I've had that address for 25 years.
Yeah, I have two AOL addresses that go back to 93 or 94, which is pretty cool.
And AOL is honestly is safer than a lot of these other services. They do a really good job stopping spam email. On that level, I'm very happy with AOL. So
yeah, people could still get a hold of me. That's they joke. I mean, I have several email addresses at this point, but they get a hold of me. They could still find me, at these email addresses that don't have like 4 numbers at the end of them because I got them earlier, whatever. All right, so I am here with Rich Klein, who needs no introduction to anybody that listens to this show. Rich, I'm going to tell you a couple things here that I refer to you in my mind, and I hope this doesn't anger you or embarrass you, but when I think of you, the word Rich-i-pedia comes to my mind. And I follow that with the human hyperlink because we can listen to you tell a story or describe something on the many podcasts and YouTubes that you've been on. And it's amazing how you can connect the dots in our history and in our hobby. So thank you for coming. I appreciate your time.
I appreciate you having me. My old friend Frank Barning, who ran Baseball Hobby News, said Rich was Google before Google was invented.
Well, I'm glad your name is Rich-i-pedia instead of Google. Google would have been a tough way to go through life for sure. So Rich Klein is his name. This is the front of card portion of the show. So Rich, tell us what you do. Give us an occupation or position, if you don't mind.
Well, I'm currently at ComC. I've been there since January of 2017. And as we were talking on the pre-show, I'm very fortunate. I have a second act in the hobby after some time in the wilderness in between my stint at Beckett, that I was hired originally as what we called a catalog maintenance expert. But when ComC ran a bit behind, just like everybody else in the hobby did last year due to the pandemic, I haven't done as much database work, and I've done more. I still fix errors, and I also do a lot of the ID work now. And we have a team doing ID. We've caught up. We've done a great job catching up. So,
Gotcha.
We are really in a good position on that. And it's a good story to tell. It just took a while to get there. But, I'm very fortunate with the second act that I get to look all day at scans of baseball cards. I don't even have to touch them. I just get to look at scans.
All right. So we're
all worlds.
Now let's fill in maybe the bottom right of the card here. You've spoken before about your prowess on the softball field. Whether it's real or not, what position are you on the field?
Well, the story, this is a true story. In 1991, probably one of the last, actually, I played softball for the Beckett teams a few years after that, and I was okay. I was mostly a catcher. But in 1991, we still had softball as part of the National. And Lou Dials, the former Negro League star player, saw me hit, don't know where this came from. You know, we were taking like 10 swings each to catch or lead off.
Right.
Okay, that's all I knew is that I'll do my best. Well, I got 5 hits that day.
Wow.
I don't know how. I've never had hits like that before and never had hits like that since. I think I had like 2 doubles and 3 singles. I've never, you know, maybe because when he said catch or lead off, something just clicked that day.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
really do this.
That's funny.
And we had a bunch of fun. And I used to, you know, and I have a trophy at my home from the National in 1986. I have 2 trophies, one for trivia and one for softball. They're not really delineated, but that's
Right.
where they're from. And so I wasn't great, but I was good enough where I usually knew how to latch on to the best teammates.
Right. That's good.
That 5 for 5 is like my highlight ever playing softball.
That's awesome. That's
that
awesome.
and the unassisted triple play I pulled off when I was in college playing second base, short outfield, and somehow I pulled off an unassisted triple play on a liner.
Oh,
and I still don't know how I did that at one either.
so you're at
But
least a
other than
two-tool
that, I
player.
kind of wasn't that good.
Yeah, well, you're at least a 2-tool player. Then if you could, you got a little glove and you got a little bat, which is
No, I was terrible with the glove. That was just I cut my glove out, running, caught it, and stepped on the bag and tapped some
that's great.
guy running. It was like one of these perfect plays.
Right.
I would never be able to duplicate that again.
Well, hopefully somebody was watching. We're going to flip the card over here. What year were you born?
I was born in 1960. I'm 61 years old.
Tell us about your
The
hometown.
#1 song, since you're a music guy, I am
Uh-huh.
proud to say I have a really great song. You know, people know what song was #1 the week they were born. Well, my #1 song, and now they're both resting in peace, was the Everly Brothers with Kathy's Clown, which
Oh,
was
there
their
you
first
go.
single for their new record label at the time. And it's truly a great song. And I'm very lucky that that was the #1 song when I was born.
You know, music, a lot of people don't realize, most people don't realize that music would not be the same if it weren't for the Everly Brothers. The influence that they had on a couple guys in Liverpool, right? A couple guys in Manchester, maybe Graham Nash. The English folks loved them, and we know what came out of England in the 60s, and a lot of it has to do with the Everly Brothers. So yeah, it's unfortunate, right? They're both gone now, but they
And what
definitely
people
left their
don't
mark.
realize about the Everly Brothers is they kept making minor hits into the mid and late 60s. Bowling Green, their last top 40 single, and 67 is a pretty good song.
Right.
And they came back in the 80s, and Paul McCartney wrote a really good song for them called On the Wings of a Nightingale that did very well on the adult contemporary charts, but stalled at number 48 on the pop charts. But
They
I
didn't. They didn't get along at all.
music. People might start asking me about music and not sports.
Yeah. Well, we've heard a lot about that too. You know, there's some people that talk up your music game just as much as your card game. Your home. Give us your hometown real quick.
I was born in Hackensack, so New Jersey, you know,
Yeah.
the Billy Joel song. And I
Yeah.
was raised in Saddlebrook, New Jersey. We have exactly one major league player out of that town, which is Joe Cunningham.
Right.
And I tell people my favorite thing, I purchased this at the National this year. My good friend Clint Adler, knowing where I was from, knowing the story, did a lot of autographs with baseballs and index cards of people from the 50s and 60s. And he knew he was charging me cheap, but he wanted me to have it. He had, I believe, a PSA DNA index card of Joe Cunningham, and he said $5, and I couldn't get my wallet fast enough out. And the moths are flying out. I had him the $5, and I told people, you know, I bought cards at the National, and most of those cards are designed for resale. But my favorite thing I bought at the National was the 3x5 index card from Clint Adler of Joe Cunningham. And I've been asked on another show what card I would take to the grave with me, but it won't be a card. I've got a wonderful plaque, and it's got all the Cunningham cards that my late friend Ernie Montella made. And it's got all the cards. It's got a signed 8x10. It's got little pennant inserts like they did in the 60s.
Right.
He did a really good job on it. He was really proud of it. And
What position was Joe Cunningham?
I had sent one of my Beckett teammates up with a bunch of cards to the Willow Grove or Fort Washington or whatever town it was in, Fort Washington, whatever town it was in. Go find Ernie Montella, hand him these cards, give him my address, and he'll know what to do. And the guy, and my friend said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Absolutely, just do it." And he did, and was like, "How did you know?" And I said, "I know him. I know Ernie. I know Ernie takes great pride." And we did a Beckett tribute episode to him and Mike Galella and, you know, and other guys from the Philly area, Max Silberman, and all those guys really helped concrete the Philly area in terms of good people involved with the hobby.
Yeah, it was, everything was very regional back then, right? You thought that you were the only, I thought that I was the only serious collector in my neighborhood. You thought that Philadelphia was the only area where collecting happened, but there was nothing connected all these hubs. You guys would float between the hubs, but
Well, we were lucky. We're 90 minutes from the Willow Grove show, so that was an easy enough drive down.
right.
And Willow Grove was such a big show. And when I grew up, when I first got in the hobby, the Montclair State Show was the big show. And you could always tell for the next, if somebody said the first show they attended was the Montclair State Show, you knew they'd been in the hobby for a while.
Yeah.
So it makes a difference, what shows the first one people attended
Yep.
to, but only 90 minutes away. And hanging out with the Philly people was a ton of fun. And
Different
I
breed.
enjoyed them. And
Yeah.
when you go to the National, another of the great Philly dealers was Jerry and Etta Hirsch. And Etta's now head of the National Dealers Board, so to speak. So she was at the front desk. If you went to the National, you saw Etta at the, one of the tables at the front desk. And I always liked seeing Etta. And she's had some personal tragedies in recent years, but
Right.
she's trucking along. And I'm so glad that she's still working at it.
Right. So, your year by year or the back of your card continuing, you've been a dealer, you've worked for Beckett, you worked for ComC. I found out this weekend that you had a brief stint, or maybe a long stint, I don't know, but a stint with the Leaf. So you've kind of done it all. You've touched all the bases, dealer.
Yeah, the only thing I haven't done is work for a manufacturer.
Right.
And I think at this point in my life, that one's going to not happen unless Fanatics decides to put me on some dealer advisory or some
Hey,
executive.
if they were wise, man, nobody knows cards like you. That would be a smart thing.
And I always try to look at things from a business level, which shocks people.
Yeah.
But, you always, I want the collector touch, but I also try to look at things as a business level. There was a conversation this week on the Net 54 vintage boards where somebody asked why dealers don't want to trade necessarily. And I pointed out I had a chat with one of my dealer friends at the National, and he only had basically one booth, and he spent $3,000. So if you give him two booths, it's $4,500 or $4,300, whatever, to be at the National. And if you're spending that much money, you're not going to trade unless you get something that you can flip immediately or you win in the trade. And it's hard for collectors to understand on a business level.
And everybody's so educated now. All the information's at their fingertips. So that's not going to be easy for a dealer to flip something that quickly at that show. I get that. And I don't expect that out of
a customer for an item. If you come to me and you trade, and I know you've never you said you've sold only one card in your life.
I've become a dealer, sort of, but that's a different story now.
But if you come with me and I'll just throw out an example, and you have a 1975 George Brett. Put a stop.
You got to flip your hamburger over.
Hey, I'm doing a YouTube video. I'm doing the chat. Can I call you back? Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. That was my wife.
Oh, that's important for sure.
So yeah, I just told her I need to call. I'll call her back, but that's.
No worries. So, it's understandable. Dealers. Nobody owes anybody anything in this. You look at the cards. You buy the cards. You can't get mad at a dealer for not trading or buying something from you. It's just the way it is. There's many opportunities and platforms to do that. You don't have to harass a dealer to do that. Your favorite team growing up?
My favorite team growing up was the Yankees in the American League and the Houston Astros in the National League. Because when I was 3 years old, we spent a summer in Houston, and I saw my first baseball games ever. And of course, I don't remember them, at the old Colt 45 Stadium with the Mosquitoes, us and the Mosquitoes. And apparently we met a bunch of the Colt 45 players at that time. I guess Don Notabart had a car dealership, and some of the others would make personal appearances. So I was 3 years old and meeting all these players. Obviously, I don't remember any of that.
Now, there weren't a lot of, on the Colts, there weren't a lot of, I remember the 63 Mets when you had everybody. I think maybe Ashburn, Yogi Berra was there. You had just all these old timers came to the Mets. That didn't happen with the Colts, did it?
Well, it kind of happened with the Colts, but they had newer guys. I mean, they had traded for Nellie Fox for the 60s.
Okay.
They've
Wow.
got a Hall of Fame,
Interesting.
but they've got guys like Jimmy Wynn and Joe
Right.
Morgan
Well, yeah, young guys.
in
Yeah.
their farm system.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
they've Rusty Staub's like
Yep.
he's got a 63 rookie card and a 64 first solo card. So you've got Jim Wynn's on a 64 rookie card. So you have the makings of some of the better players, but most of the starters in those years weren't the older guys. The Astros, the Colt 45s, made a deliberate effort to build the team, and they did a pretty good job. It's just that the Mets got really lucky where they developed some amazing pitchers and blew past them in
Yeah,
60.
for sure. Huh? You know who hit the first home run in the Astrodome? You know that, right?
Mickey Charles Mantle
That's
in
right.
1965 exhibition game.
Pretty
You
impressive,
can
right?
hear
That's pretty
that,
cool.
by the way. There is a radio tape of that game, and you can actually hear Mantle hit the home run.
They had, I think that's the year they had grass, right, in the Astrodome.
Yeah, they tried grass, realized it wouldn't work, and that's why they went to AstroTurf.
Right.
They
So
also tried not to have natural lighting come in,
yeah,
and you couldn't see the ball in the sun.
yeah.
So they eventually had to that's
Trial and error, man.
trial and error. You didn't know half that stuff.
Yeah, all trial and error. It's crazy. Now, late 60s, the Yankees weren't that good. So, and obviously the Astros weren't that good, and the Mets were good. So what was going on? Young Rich Klein, what was he doing to pass the time during the late 60s?
Well, he was listening and watching to a lot of baseball games and a lot of, Channel 9 during the non-baseball season covered a lot of the Rangers and
Knicks were
games.
good at that time, right?
We only got to see road games.
Right.
So if you got to see games, and later the Islanders and some of the New York, New Jersey Nets with a young Julius Erving, the most dominant. You got to see Julius Erving not at his
love
peak.
the man.
I got to see him at his peak.
Best sixer ever.
And so we, I watched, listened to a lot of baseball. I played a lot of APBA, APA, so I was always immersed in sports. And obviously I'm in school too, but
right.
Yeah,
and then you're in middle school or high school, I guess, or around that age, and then the Yankees just got real good.
and
real good, huh?
Shared the experience when Chris Chambliss hit the homer off Mark Littell.
Yeah.
We all, in college, I'd hear the stories. I ran around the block, or I screamed, or I did things. And I remember when he hit the home run, I was at home and I was screaming too. And
right.
I think everybody screamed. And the next year I'm in college and Reggie hits the 3 homers. And I think I threw a couch out my dorm window. I was so excited.
It was, so let me ask you a question. What was your first memory of sports?
I don't remember my first memory, but I think people, I know Rob Nyer on the Weekly Saber cat news thing he does. He does interviews a person every week, and that's one of the questions, your first baseball memory. And my first baseball memory, as far as I know, is coming home during the 66 World Series and watching the Robinsons hit homers and watching those 4 games. And that's my first memory. Wow. I do remember the 67 season quite a bit more. And I may or may not have gone to a game in 67. In 68, I know my father dragged my father, and my father made sure I went. We went to some Yankee games in 68, day games when it was safer to be there.
Yeah.
So I can say I saw Mickey Mantle play in person. Right. And I'm very happy about that. And, in one of the games we saw, and thank goodness for Retro Sheet, was one of Denny McLain's 6 losses in his 31-6 season in 68. And it's a really funky game because Dick McAuliffe was suspended for 5 games because he charged the mound and hurt and sent Tommy John out for the season. Yes, that Tommy John.
Yep.
And I think he had hurt Tommy John's shoulder, and they gave him a 5-game suspension. And it's just a funky game. Yeah. Where I can say I saw Mantle. I know a couple of years ago, a couple of years after that, I saw Willie Mays. It was a group trip, and we saw the Giants. So I saw Mantle, I saw Mays. I honestly don't remember if I ever saw Hank Aaron in person play a game.
Yeah,
but I saw enough of the other players, so I know. But I know I saw Mantle and Mays.
Now, your first memory of cards. You have a vivid memory of that? Or?
I have a vivid memory. I bought a couple penny packs in 67 because somehow I ended up with a Don Clendenin and Tito Fuentes card.
Right.
But my first real memories of buying tons of packs are 68 third series. I'm blessed.
Oh, you waited till late in the season, huh?
Yeah, like April, it has
Yeah.
Mantle in it. I mean,
Right.
you talk about getting a great series. I get Mantle. I think I get Willie McCovey. I get Orlando
Wow.
Cepeda. I get Harmon Killebrew. For some reason, they loaded up the third series. I don't know this at the time. I've got a Johnny Bench rookie.
Yeah.
I mean, that series is just loaded. So it's all downhill from there. When the
Yeah.
Packs have Mantle, you can't do much better.
I love the 68s. I mean, I know people, take a pass on that, but I love them all. I shouldn't just, but that's the year I was born. So I love the 68 burlaps for sure.
68, the good thing with 68, I mean, you have a couple expensive cards now with the Ryan rookie, the bench rookie.
Yep.
The Mantle's an accessible card. There are some tricky, tough cards in the last two series, but it's an accessible set to get.
Yeah.
And to me, you're very lucky that at least your birth set is an
Yeah.
accessible set.
I'm getting there. I'm working my way back. Thanks to you. And last weekend, I'm getting closer on my 71s, my 72s, a little bit of 70s left too. So, and then we'll hit the 60s hard. I'm having a pretty good head start there. So we'll see what happens. Cards. When were you hooked? When do you think you were hooked?
Immediately.
Immediately. It's the
Immediately. I would
same way,
watch
Rich.
baseball. I would watch baseball games. I'd play, in those days, I think in the winter of 67, my holiday present was the year's subscription to the Sporting News with I think they gave you 4 books for like $29.95, the Register, the Dope Book, the Baseball Guide, and the World Series or something like that.
Wow.
The record book. And, the one that fascinated me, of course, was the Baseball Register.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I'd watch a game. Oh, there's Tommy Davis. Oh, there's a card of him. So the cards come to life watching the baseball game. So I want to say basically by 68, I'm hooked. I mean, I'm hooked immediately.
Who's your biggest enabler?
My dad. My dad was my biggest. My dad was a vest pocket stamp and coin dealer.
Oh, okay.
And I've talked about this on Dr. Jim's podcast. And
right.
So he had the collecting gene at some sort. And he passed it on to me. And I think I had it worse than I still have it worse than he does. But
well, I'm the same way. We do it to the nth degree above what we were taught. So when you collected, I assume you just collected all baseball, or
I did football, I did basketball, I did hockey. I mean, all of them were accessible, and I mean, they were cheap. And so, all 68, 72, 73, I collected all the sports, not all the series, but I collected all cards in all the sports.
And you were trying to build team sets, player sets, full sets?
I was just working on, I mean, I really wasn't working on sets, but I would build sets. I mean, I built a 69 set from the packs.
Right.
I actually did baseball and football and hockey. I had the tops was an easy 132 cards. Right. Basketball, I did less basketball until the 70s, but I enjoyed basketball. I just enjoyed the cards.
Yeah. And your friends too? Do you guys flip, pitch,
I mean,
all that stuff, trade?
We collected cards. So yeah, my friends collected. So we'd get in trouble with the teachers, and sometimes they'd confiscate our cards. So we had to be careful.
Yeah. It's funny because I feel like I learned how to gamble, when you're flipping cards, and pitching was just a pseudo matter of skill, but flipping was straight up gambling,
And in retrospect, these teachers should have realized how much you can learn from cards.
Yeah.
And let you do it. You learn geography, you'll learn math, you learn how to read. Some of them have long bios.
I picked
in retrospect, it's just like comic books.
Yep.
Hey, people don't realize how much you learn from if a good comic book. The late great Stan Lee used to talk about how he put fancy vocabulary words in every Marvel comic, just so kids would have to look them up.
Yep. And that's a great idea, right? And it took effort back then to look it up, right?
I'm not saying Topps put fancy words in, but you still had to read. Sometimes they did terrible grammar. Sometimes they really had fun things.
Yeah, but it was you're absolutely right. I am horrible at math. Thank God my two boys are great at math. But whatever math I did learn, I learned from the back of baseball cards. Average. That's you have to learn what an average is. That's a basic mathematics principle, and you learn that on the back of cards. And I chose my guy was Carly Yastrzemski. I have no idea why, but it had to be the hardest name to remember how to spell. So.
I bought some Yasbreads in 68, and I wish I had kept the bread labels, and I didn't. And I had friends of mine tell me, Tom, my friend Tom Reed, 28, 30 years later, told me there's no bread labels of the 68 Jazz he ever saw. And he was a bread label guy.
Uh-huh.
And I once posted something like, I've never seen a Jazz bread label. And I know friends of mine told me back in the day they'd never seen it. And my Twitter friend, Mark Hoyle, really dedicated Red Sox collector, posts the tweet saying, here are the Jazz bread labels.
Oh man.
I was happy to see that they do exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody didn't throw them away. So if you want a challenge, go get one of those.
I follow him on Twitter, Mark Hoyle, and I see some of the stuff that he has, and it blows me away. I thought I unearthed I had a box for years that I didn't touch. It was the 81 scratch off, the baseball. And I had them all separated, and I had them in a box. And I thought the box was piled high, and I decided to sort those out one day. And as I got deeper and the box emptied, I realized there was a bunch of I think it was 68 and 70 Arco issues, Red Sox issues, and I offered them up to him. He's like, "Nope, I already have those." You know, he has seen it all, and he has it all. I think Red Sox wise. So
if he doesn't have it, it may not exist.
Yeah, that's great. Let's talk about the 70s because that's what I love. Do you have a favorite set from the 70s? Did you keep going into your teenage years?
I started getting more active late in the 70s. I don't want to say a hiatus. I bought the 75 and the 76 set. We had stores by that time. So I actually went to the stores and bought the 75 and 76 set for like $15 each.
And these are hand collated sets back then, except for 74.
74 is the only year J.C. Penney through their catalog actually has 74 factory sets. So you can get a 74 factory set.
Yeah.
But, and then about 77, I started doing cards my senior year of high school. I had more time. I was down, I only needed 4 courses to graduate. One is independent study. So I wasn't having to work real hard as a senior. I mean, I was able to senior slump the whole year.
Sure.
I spent more time doing cards and, as a senior, and I subscribed during my senior year to both the Trader Speaks and Sports Collectors Digest. My first Trader Speaks is January 77. My first SCD, Sports Collectors Digest, is the April 15th, 1977 issue. And so I get into it, in fact.
Yeah, and then we were not that far away from essentially landing on the moon in our hobby with the 79 Beckett guidebook.
Right. And 79 is not just important. Dr. Beckett has a year in 79. It's like, I don't want to say it's like Einstein in 1905 when he does like the theory of relativity and something else. I mean, that's a year that changes the world. But Dr. Beckett does the baseball card price guide in 79. He does the football, basketball, hockey price guide, first book in 79 that people don't remember. He also does a baseball alphabetical in 79. So he has a year by himself. Baseball Hobby News first year is 1979. Card price update, the first really monthly price guide done by Mark Lewis and his brother-in-law Warren Karp. And they'd been buying stuff up in Long Island, and they saw a market that they thought they could make money out of, and they did for many years. So, and some of the things they did may have been a little bit, market manipulation. Right. But if you knew what you wanted to do, you ran the market with them. So it was kind of fun to do that at times. And so 79 is the year when information starts getting out there. I mean, the Beckett book gets into the bookstores.
Yep.
And the other things start getting out there. So you just don't have the Trader Speak and Sports Collectors Digest anymore. You now have plenty of things to read. So you really start getting more knowledge into the world.
Yeah, the knowledge plus the fact, the playing field was leveled, but also I think I said to you this past weekend or to Dr. Beckett how I was amazed. I didn't know it was like frontier land to me, the 60s and the 50s, because I had no way of knowing that stuff was out there other than, I started going to shows around that time as well. So really was neat to see all those cards. All it was a name with a number with a little square box next to it for a checklist. Well, it was neat to imagine.
I did my first show in 1979 and made tons of money. Of course, I'm hooked after that too. But one of the things is, and I've told the story, is the 19, one of the original checklists at the time, the Sport Americana checklist of the mid 70s before Dr. Jim uses that for his name. Card number 318 says action card 8. And I was actually building at the time a 62, what they call today a master set. 318 is listed as action card 8. Well, action card 8 is Mickey Charles Mantle. But
Number
who
8.
would know that it's Mantle unless you're looking at the card? It says action card 8.
Action card
on the
8. Yeah.
checklist and in the book, because that's all
funny.
they know.
Yeah.
And I think that's I tell people that's the impetus why I really love cataloging, because I don't want anybody else to go crazy trying to figure out what the heck action card 8 is when we know it's Mickey Mantle. And I'm serious. I think that, we talk about getting hooked. Well, I got hooked on cataloging and knowledge because of my own experience trying to build sets.
Right. In an analog form too back then, which was crazy, right? It was a lot of page flipping and stuff like that.
And I dealt in college. I probably hurt my grades, but I learned a lot. I had my parents after my freshman year, my parents paid the tuition and I paid all my other expenses through baseball cards. College was cheaper in those days. Good luck trying that today.
Yeah. Trust me.
I have to have everything graded, but in those days we brought in my college education from a really good school. I graduated at cost under $40,000.
Wow.
Today you might get one semester at a decent school for $40,000 total. So the world has changed. Obviously, most schools give you aid, but that's how much the world has changed since 1981 when I graduated on that front.
And you went to Columbia, right?
I went to Columbia.
So what was your, you didn't go to Columbia saying I'm going to be setting up tables on weekends.
Actually, I did at some point. I wish we had a interim, a Columbia TV show called Dorm Warning, and God knows this film never survived. I said, I am going to be a baseball card dealer when I get out of school.
Wow.
I actually knew my future when I was 19 years old.
But you lied to somebody though. You had to lie to your parents. You didn't tell your parents you were going to be.
No, my parents kind of knew it too. I mean, it was what it was. I mean, I knew at the age of 19 I'm going to be in the business, and I really did. I had to wait a while for the hobby to catch up to me to get my skills properly done. But I was a full-time dealer. I had a couple jobs. I worked for a great company that was way ahead of their time. I got out of college during the recession. So most of my friends who didn't go to grad school, and it took most of us an average of 18 months to get a job.
Okay.
And it wasn't a great job. I ended up at Chase Manhattan Bank, and I worked there for about 16 months. Then I went to a company called Sports Information Database, which was designed really the way baseball reference and football reference is today. But it was 25 years ahead of its time. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have all these things. It was a great idea, but it was way too ahead of its time.
What was everything stored on? We talking index cards here? We talking about reams of paper?
Computers. Everything was on a computer.
Okay.
But we were way ahead of our time. It was a great idea. The idea was great. Great staff.
Right.
Money ran out though.
Yeah.
And then the paper company wanted to buy us out. I guess they wanted to diversify, but they pulled out. And I found out they pulled out just as I'm about to begin the 85 National. I had flown out to the 85 National with a job. I come back, I don't have a job.
Right.
That's no bueno. That's no fun.
That's no good. I mean, you knew it when? When did you know it? I mean, when you got back, or did you know?
I knew it. I got a phone call. I had a message on my phone. I had to go back to my room to get a box.
That's a bummer.
Message on my phone in the hotel room saying, yes, and the person just says, no, there's no deal anymore. Right. You don't have it. Basically, you don't have a job to come home to. And one of my friends called me later to calm me down that night.
Right. Drown your sorrow in baseball cards.
Yeah. So I went through that show in a friggin' daze.
Right.
But the funniest part of the 85 National is the last thing that really generated us income was I had basically spent a month writing trivia questions for an arcade game. Well, that arcade game was at the bar or whatever next door to the hotel, the Disneyland Hotel.
Okay.
Some wise-ass kid from Long Island thought he knew all about sports and decides, he says he'll bet anybody in the room like X hundreds of dollars to play the game.
Right.
Oh, kid, I'll take
That's
you on.
amazing. Come on, man.
I'll take you on. Well, it paid for my trip, so but I take him, I just blow him away. I set a record on the machine.
uh,
And the last thing it shows is which company ran the car, what, who, where the card, where the questions come from. Son, here's my card. I wrote this game.
oh my God.
Be careful about what you're bragging in the future. You may run into somebody who knows more than you do.
I say that
To his credit, he paid. He realized
yeah.
he made the offer. To his credit, he paid. He said, I screwed up, but that paid for my trip. So I was grateful that at least I got my trip paid for by the last gasp of that company.
Right. Somebody's always got a bigger gun, right? That's what I always say. So be careful, right?
Right. But if you write the questions, you know the answers.
So tell me a little bit about the 70s here, right? What kind of, you and I were talking about music. What kind of music were you into back then?
I was more into top 40. In fact, I still listen almost every day to some version of music at the office. There's a wonderful person by the name of Rob Frankel, who's a radio historian, recreator, and he has a site on Mixcloud where he posts an old radio air check, and I'm way behind on those. I also listen to the old Don Tandler, the record handler, on Saturdays does a countdown of some 60s or 70s,
Right.
either Cashbot chart or some radio station. And that thing with Rich-i-pedia, he posts all the shows. So I have a running thing of different things I can listen to.
Yeah.
I listen to that music all day long.
I've seen you post stuff on Facebook. You seem to like you like your rhythm and blues, I think, right? And
I do. I'm a rhythm and blues guy, but I mean, I appreciate top 42 and bubblegum and schmaltzy music, and some good country. That country I like.
That was true country, right?
That was true country.
No doubt about that.
So I post, you've seen my posts, if somebody passes, and I can come up with a way to post 3 songs, or I get a Jones to do something.
Yeah.
I always like to post 3 songs unless I have a reason just to post only one, but I prefer doing the 3 play and I try not to pick the biggest hits. I try to pick something with an interesting backstory.
Yeah. For sure.
Because when Phil Everly passed, I have to do Kathy's Clown. That's number 1 the week I'm born.
Yep.
I want to do Bowling Green on the Wings of a Nightingale because not everybody remembers those songs.
Sure. Yeah. So one thing that I think the charm of the 70s, especially baseball cards, is that we start out with crew cuts in 1970, and then by the end of the decade, it's all hell breaks loose. Afros, long hair, sideburns. You lived through that, sort of. Not that you could grow sideburns at the age of 10 or 11, 12, but I don't think there's any decade in sports that changed culturally wise more than the 70s.
No, and you're right. Baseball, I never thought about that. Sports cards are a great way of looking at the change of hairstyles and how people look at cards and all that. And it's such a wild difference. And you can tell when cards were taken. In the 60s, maybe the 69 last series, you start seeing a few sideburns on the cards, but you don't see a lot. But by about 72, 73, heck is everything's done. You
Charlie
have
O. Yeah,
you
Charlie
have action photos, you have all sorts of stuff you've never had before. And it's really cool. And the thing about the 70s is that most of the cards are accessible. I mean, 72 high numbers, they've become really almost legendary. They're not harder than 70. They are harder than 71. But 70 and 72 were, in my opinion, always even. But I think 72s are more popular because they're more challenging because there's 131 of them.
Yeah.
And there are some popular players. 70 high numbers are tough by themselves too. I mean, but I had more 70 high numbers than I had 72s. But I always thought the 71s were always the easier high number, and 73 are really easy high numbers. And so there's not as much like hidden scarcities in the 70s as there are in the 60s.
Right. Yeah. I think too that especially the early 70s, I want to say 70 through 75, I love the top sets. I think they got a little stale later on, maybe a little too much white. Maybe they were phoning it in. I don't know why that is, but I just don't find the creativity in the late 70s.
And yet 77 and 79, I really like those sets. 77 to me was the fifth year. You're right. They're kind of phoning it in. They're making it's almost a boilerplate of 660 cards. They are doing a few things, but I think they had two new teams. They were doing some new things. They have the brother combos in 76 has father, son, 77 has
The brothers.
brothers, and they have the team leaders, and they have the what happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I mean, why they came up with Bob Keegan for 20 years ago, I'm still wondering, but they're trying to do slightly different things.
Yeah.
The last year of 660, but you're right, and they sort of staled on that.
Now,
and then 78, they go to 726, and we have the double prints for a while. But they realized they had to add cards to the set. So
yeah, and I guess that they saw the writing on the wall, but obviously the early 80s were an interesting time too, because we all of a sudden tripled the amount of cards we had access to, right? 3 different manufacturers.
And I wrote, and I sent in stuff to Baseball Hobby News. They had like dealer quotes, and I wrote this, and I'm going to paraphrase my exact quote, so it's not an exact quote. 1980, you could buy a set maybe for $10. I said, collectors have to be really careful, because if you're not careful, you might spend $60 to get all 3 of the major sets. Good luck with that today.
Yeah, really.
Today you're looking $60. I might get a pack for $60.
Yeah, and if you don't get a card worth $60 out of a box break, it's the end of the world for these. I have a breaker that I share a room with back here. And he gets upset when he doesn't get a big hit every time he opens a pack, but not me. I just want the
do a lot of breaks, but I'm a big fan of breaks done right.
Okay.
If you're a Phillies fan, and you want to get into a break and the price point is reasonable, I'm all in favor of that, because you're going to get the cards, the Phillies cards you want. So I'm all in favor of breaks done right.
Well, I'm going to come clean with you here. I've never said this publicly, but every card I want has already been made. So it doesn't appeal to me too much to break. Some of the older stuff, they do break older sets, and I have joined in on that. I'm talking about 60s and 50s, but these breaks, it's just not me. I mean,
I don't do breaks either, but I'm just saying, for a lot of the newer collectors, breaks done right.
Yeah, for sure.
Gets you the collection you want.
I'm going to ask you to, I'm going to try to scramble your mind here. Top 5 cards from the 70s.
Well, my favorite card from the 70s, and I've mentioned this, is a basketball card.
Okay.
Of a scrub that had a moment of glory in the 1976 playoffs against the Phoenix Suns, where he has a major role in the triple overtime game, and it was about it for his career, and he passed away too young. But my favorite card from the 70s is, I believe, the 75-76 Topps Glenn McDonald basketball card.
Glenn McDonald.
I mean, you would never, and I remember, I hate the Celtics because I'm a Knicks fan.
Yep.
But that is my favorite card from the 70s. And I enjoy, like you talked about Oscar Gamble. You got to love the Oscar, I'm just going to riff this. You got to love the Oscar Gamble Afro card.
Yep.
You've got to love in basketball the Darnell Dr. Dunk Hillman oversized card with the Afro that's as big as the card. To me, the ABA guys were special because they were a different league. So, I love the ABA. I love the AFL.
Right.
There are cards, and as I said, I'm just riffing.
How about this?
There's a 71 Topps, yes, great shirt, the Philadelphia Bell.
Yep.
I believe they were the World Football League team in 74, 75. Yep. Yeah, they padded their admission, and that was it for the league, and that was it for them.
Big stadium.
And there's a 71 Topps Joe Cap card with the Patriots, and it's an action card. It's like the only action card in the 71 Topps football set. They had been doing it in baseball, but they got that football card in.
Was he on the Bills or the Patriots?
He was on the Patriots. He went to the Vikings. He didn't like the Vikings didn't raise his salary, so he sat out and they traded him to the Patriots, and his career basically ends. He was also in his mid-30s by that time.
Gotcha.
So there are some really cool cards. I like the inaction cards of the 72s.
Yep.
They're the 72 high numbers have some really interesting. The traded cards are big
Carlton.
things.
Yep.
And being an E and V guy, you do get things like the 74 E and V. Like you wonder, why tops stop with the Washington National Leagues at 396? How did they only do the first half?
Yeah.
Why
Makes no
didn't they
sense.
do David Mark Winfield? Could
You
you
and I talked
imagine?
about that this weekend. I bought 3 of those from you, as a matter of fact. 3. I bought a McCovey,
Yes,
and
you did. I
yeah,
appreciate that. But could
yeah,
you imagine if
it's
Topps had done,
crazy,
especially during
crazy.
the glory days of the 80s when those cards were, when the 70 superstars were mostly at their price point peak?
Yep. And
You know, if,
Dave Freisleven had 4 cards that year, right? At
yeah,
least 4 cards.
and some of them are tough. And I actually, and somebody told me the 74 checklists are like 10, 12, $15 on
Oh,
eBay. And I'm thinking, okay, I know they were tough. And I said, well, when I always had trouble, the one I never could keep in stock when I was a dealer, whatever my price point was card number 273. So I bet that's one you need. It goes, no, that's the only checklist I have.
they were.
So you never know. So, but 74, 273 always was a tough card for me. I tell the story how, we're talking about the Washington National Leaguers, and there were these brothers that did the Montclair State Show, and they would come to me, and even when the show moved, do you have any Randy Jones Washington National League card? They would have everyone but Randy Jones.
Right.
And it was a rookie year, but it was just for some reason that was the one they didn't get.
First of all, what year was this?
74.
So, I mean, what year were at the Montclair you talking
79 to 80.
So was he a Met at that point? He might have been a Met at that point, right?
He was, but by 81 he's a Met.
Yeah,
But even before
yeah.
that, they're looking for the card.
Right.
We had a nickname for Randy Jones in that day. I had some friends who would work in the press box, and their nickname for Randy Jones was Randy 0 plus Jones.
Why was that?
Here are Randy Jones stats: 0 innings pitched,
Unreal.
four hits, 5 runs, all earned, 1 walk. And then the response from the press box was, and I hope this is not going to be, I hope we don't have a kid's rating on this. He was horse bleep.
Yeah.
I won't finish the word, but
he had a great season. He had 2 great half seasons back to back, and
he was 75, 76. He was great. He's also
amazing.
really good. He was for a while a really good follow on Facebook.
Oh, really? Did not know that.
So was Fritz Peterson until he got diagnosed with dementia
He's an old
or
Yankee,
Alzheimer's.
Right? Yeah. I'm going to expand this question to give me, if you can, 5. If not, I understand, of all time. We all have our own opinions and some of them overlap, but top 5 cards of all time.
Well, I'm not going to go by price. I talked about Donald. Yeah. Another of my favorite cards is the 57 Topps Felix Mantilla card.
Okay.
It's just another card where I think the photography works great and everything on the card works great. And I'm a big fan of the 67 set. I'm a big fan of the 57 set. I love the 53 Bowman color, Bowman black and white. And how can you not include the Pee Wee Reese card? And one of my few regrets in the hobby is my late friend Ace Marchand. And this is one of these things I wish I had bought. Showed me the magazine where the original photo came from.
It's amazing. You said it was a Life magazine, right?
It was a Life magazine, 1947, I believe. Amazing. And I wish I had bought it. It's one of these things where I sort of wish I had bought it. And I don't really look for it, but I'd like to see it again, just to see it.
Yeah.
And I had a card, and it was, when I sold a bunch of stuff, it was one card that sold, but I ended up with a bunch of the Buck Barker cards from his collection after he passed. I got his post-serial collection.
Okay.
I also got a bunch of high numbers. Most of the 50, that deal I bought from Tom Reed actually transferred me from just a good local dealer to a dealer with national stock.
Wow.
So it was a great deal. I mean, I sold, but one of the cards had the Buck Barker signature on the back, and I wish I had kept that.
Gotcha.
So it's just, I don't remember what the post-serial card was, but it is that. And I love cards like that. I see these cards all day long. So I don't really have 5 favorites.
Right.
But I do have favorite, I just look at a card and say, that's cool.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely right about the Pee Wee one for sure, right? That is true art. Absolutely.
Well, many of the cards in those years are true art. The 53 Topps has so many true art cards in it.
Yep.
To me, there's hidden secrets all over. 71 greatest moments you can find early. The only 2 people that are pictured on the card that are not just named in the set are they took all the photography in New York. So you have Jerry Grody and Thurman Munson.
Right. Yeah.
That's really cool. There's a bunch in the 71 Veda Pinson shows Thurman Munson,
Yeah.
the guy as he's catching. So
yeah, that landscape card of Munson's incredible for sure. Um so a couple other things here before I let you go. What is your favorite thing about the hobby, past and present, and does it continue to be, or has your opinion evolved?
well, the fact that I've made a living out of it for many years is wonderful. I mean, that's a blessing. But your mutual podcaster, webcaster, John Newman,
Mm-hmm.
has a saying, the hobby is the people, or I always tease him and say the people are the hobby.
Right.
But in reality, I also ran shows for many years. And I realized what I enjoyed more, and they were 40, 50 table shows. I drew anywhere usually from 90 to 150 people. So they weren't outrageous. But you started building relationships with the people coming in and their successes, even their failures. And, as you build a relationship, you might sell them cards, but you also would tell them, hey, I know you're looking for this. Go see so-and-so. Go see so-and-so.
Right.
And so I had a lot of fun. And I made it a point just so I would know too, is that if I saw somebody I didn't know, hey, what, I'm just curious what you bought. I'm not doing this right because I care. I just want to know what you bought to make sure you found things you needed.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed that part. I like running the smaller shows. Kyle Robertson does a great job with the shows right now. So I don't feel I have to run anything.
Yeah.
He does the big show now, and then he does by the airport 100 table show.
Okay.
There's no reason for me to bother right now.
Right. It's a good show. I had a good time.
What?
I had a great time this past weekend. It's a good show.
No, he runs a really good show, as I said, and that's 10 minutes from my house. Why should I bother running a show if I can do a really good show that's, literally 10 minutes from my house,
And it gives you more time with the people, right? Instead of putting out fires all the time. Yeah. It's absolutely. It's about the people. It's funny because my cards were always a diversion or an escape from society. And I would, whether in my room as a kid or now in my card cave in my basement, I sort them, I look at them, all that stuff. But I keep hearing the hobby is the people, or you guys talk about the people. And this was one of the reasons I went to the Dallas show this past weekend, was to experience that. And I got to meet you and other people. And it really is amazing after this many years, my 53rd year on earth, that I'm discovering that, it is about the people. And yes.
And the other thing is the card, and I've said this, and Dr. Beckett is one of the few people that actually understands what I'm coming from on this. Especially the cards from my youth, they talk to me.
Yep.
You may understand that.
Yeah, for sure.
I look at, and it brings back the memories. So the cards, especially the ones I collected, if I see them, they talk to me.
Yeah.
And, and it brings back the memories, and it's just really cool.
Yeah, it's funny because I have most of the stuff I have from the 70s, probably from 73 on, maybe 74 on, were ones that I, for the most part, pulled out of packs and held on to all those years. I've lived in, all the moves I've made since I was 20 years old. They've been with me coast to coast, whatever, houses, apartments, through the kids, all that stuff. So that it is, when I look at that, it's amazing to think of these things have been through everything with me. And I recently got some lots via auction from the 50s. And I think that that's part of the thing too, is these cards all have a story to tell. They're never going to tell them, but they've been through so many hands, and eventually they were initially pulled from a pack by a kid, and kids like us when we were younger. So that's one of the cool things about it, is every card has a story to tell, and a history, right?
Right. And when I catch up I've fallen behind for various reasons on this music listening. But when I catch up, then I hope to listen to at least, I started watching whenever I catch up, I listen to one or two old sports games a week. And when I do that while I'm working, and then if I get lucky, I'm looking at cards for ComC of the same era while I'm listening to these games from the 80s that are on TV, or the 60s that are on the radio, or the 70s.
It's amazing.
And it's really cool. And that's what I mean by they talk to me, because you're seeing these people.
Right.
You see these things. And I remember, and this is one of my favorite columns I ever wrote when I was writing for Sports Collectors Daily. I was watching when I still had MLB Network, and we discussed before we got on the air, how hard it is that baseball is just making it impossible for people like me and you to watch and love the game. They're making it a struggle.
Right.
And it's horrible in some ways, unless you want to lay out tons of money.
Right.
And there's the 69 Phillies Cubs game. And there are two guys playing for the Phillies. And I'm hearing their names. And, they played most of the season for the Phillies. They're not just up for a game or two. They're not starters, but they're with the team. And I said, I never heard of them. And then I realized the reason I never heard of them, they don't have any cards.
That's crazy.
And the cards help keep their memories alive.
Yeah.
Seeing them in the game keeps their memories alive.
Right.
But if you have the cards, you really see that, their memory, everybody's memory is more alive.
Yep.
We have a statement that, in a sense, you pass twice. You pass when you pass, and you also pass when the last person remembers you. Mm-hmm. Well, seeing these cards and, seeing the tobacco cards, we now remember Fred Merkle for more than the era. We look at Howie Camness or George Mullen of the 1910 Detroit Tigers, and you remember George Mullen.
Yeah.
So having these cards lets you remember these people.
Yeah.
And it's a real joy to see that, and not having cards of those two guys. And it's not Topps' fault. They weren't really stars. Whatever reason, they fell through a crack. They weren't playing a full season.
Yep.
Topps may have figured they're not coming back the next year, and they weren't. So their scout was correct. But
it's the 69 Phillies though. So.
Right, 69 Phillies. Yeah. They're not really a good team either.
No.
And so, it's okay. I mean, on that level, it's okay. But on another level, it's kind of sad, but I get to play with cards. I get to look at cards, and I get to sort cards. You can't see it right now because I use this background when I'm at the office. But I've got, I'm turning around, 5, 10, 13, 16, 19. I got probably about 20,000 cards here that I just have to process. And we haven't had a synagogue show for a while, but I still sell the boxes for the synagogue.
Right.
So I've got about 20,000 cards. I'll just look at once, transfer them to an appropriate box. I put them in 3200 so they don't conflate with what I own, which are either in 3-row shoe boxes that I take to the shows or monster boxes that I use for backup at home. I make sure I have a system set up. And I got 2 huge donations at the show. And, I'm not publicizing that I still take donations. I don't, but there are still local people who know I still take them. The money goes to our synagogue's brotherhood. We use that for various charitable purposes. So it's still going for good things.
Yep.
It's just that I'm not running the show right now. So I'm not giving everybody a bag of cards when they walk in the door.
Right.
I think I had more fun giving people a bag of cards and a prize when they walked in the door. And it was $1 to get in the door. And, and I don't know if I yelled at, but I was told, you should be $2. But I wanted to start it at $1 because I wanted people to have a minor skin in the game. And it was a suggested donation. We'd let you in if, unfortunately, I might have to make it admission, especially now, if I ever do it again with all the people that we know have been walked out or, caught at the Dallas card show.
Right.
Using discounts they should not be using.
Yep.
We're talking, but his name is Ruben. He basically runs the security for the Dallas card show, and he monitors. They have cameras. The room I was in had a camera.
Yep.
And he was showing me that if they were able to transfer, and I'm not a technical guy, but they transferred from the cameras they were using. Ruben showed me the morning after what happened. They transferred from the camera to his phone. He was showing me the guy stealing cards on his phone that was on the camera.
Right.
It was pretty, you heard that. We were talking about that before the dinner. It was pretty amazing just to see that. Thankfully they caught the guy the next day. He got so overconfident that he came back to try to do more.
Amazing, huh? Return to the scene.
Fortunately, this one has a happy ending.
Yeah.
They walked him out. They took him to the hotel. The deal is he returned all the cards. There were 2 cards he did not have. He paid the people in full for the cards that he took. So there's nothing. So the hotel basically, if you ever show up on our property again, it's criminal trespass.
Oh, there you go. He's been walked off, right?
So, but he's not charged.
Right.
So to me, it's a happy ending where everything got returned. If he shows up again, charging admission refuses him. You
Right.
can refuse
Yeah.
any charge admission.
Right.
And it's good.
Well,
but,
yeah.
He's not going to jail. He got a heck of a good lesson.
Well, you should be charging for your show. I mean, a cup of coffee costs $5, Rich. People.
I
can
know,
afford
and I
$5 to
should
get into
dollars, but
Yeah.
I always wanted to be $1 just because it infuriated me, when I'd go to some of the shows in the early 90s and it'd be $3-4 to get in for 20 tables.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's $1. And I wanted people to pay $1, which is, I wanted them to pay something. I wanted them to pay something.
Right.
But, and sometimes I would do shopping sprees or door prizes. And if I did shopping sprees, the wife or the kids come in, I said, here's your option.
Right.
You can either come in for free, but if you want a door prize ticket or door prize, shopping spree tickets, it's $1. And, it was a mix. Some people just said, I'll come in for free. And other people said, no, that's a good deal. So we did that and that was fine.
Good.
And, but I enjoyed running the shows, but I don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
My life's a lot easier.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions and then I have a real humdinger for you. I've been waiting for this for ages. What do you do other than collect? Do you have any other hobbies?
It's my hobby. Music.
Music. Well, there you go. That's legit for sure. Yeah.
Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night. We're now in Wire Club. But it's like the remnants of an old AOL music trivia room.
Okay.
We play games or we sing songs. And I do that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night.
Okay.
And, and during baseball season, I say, I'm so happy this room has returned to its real purpose. We're keeping up with baseball.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have maybe 20, 25 people who come into the room on a regular basis. And in reality, the last 18 months, it's been a blessing because in a way, it's like going to the neighborhood bar every night without drinking.
Sure.
It's like hanging out with a bunch of friends. In fact, one of them lives in Cleveland. So when they made the announcement, they may bring back the IX Center, I said, looks like we'll do dinner in a couple of years. I met him for the first time. I knew him for 20 years. I finally met him at the National in 2018.
Did they make that announcement that they're bringing that place back?
Well, they didn't make the announcement the National's coming back, but they made the announcement the IX Center is
really. That's what I mean, because that's where they have the Cleveland Auto Show and stuff like that.
Yeah, they made the announcement it's coming back.
Interesting. Wow, I thought it was gone.
So I sent one of the guys in the room, and it looks like we're doing dinner in a couple of years.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So I knew him for 20 years, never met him. We had a really great dinner. We had a really fun time. We're both music people. He actually collected cards as a kid, so we have that too. I told him not to go to the National because that would overwhelm him.
Yeah,
and the World show, which I told him he should go to, unfortunately hasn't existed since then.
Yeah.
But it's like for all of us, it's at this point, it's not like we're competitive in any way. It's even though it's a game, it's more like we're hanging out.
Camaraderie, right?
Camaraderie, and especially during the worst of the COVID, shutdown, it was a way for all of us to just keep track of everybody.
Yep.
So I do that. And the other thing I listen to, and I do this at home, and I don't do this as much as the often until I catch up, are some political podcasts. But I try not to talk about that because politics is such a tough subject, but I have certain things I like to listen to.
Sure.
And they're not extreme left or extreme right, but I like listening to them because they're usually fairly common sense and they're usually run by people who know what they're doing.
And it sounds like in that case, it isn't because you want to be proven right. It's because maybe you want to be better educated on something and perhaps your mind, you're open to changing your mind on a subject, right?
I want to know what's going on.
Right.
And I find that's fairly common. That's why news stations do so well with, the news radio stations do so well with older people, because you listen to radio, there's no music for us anymore to listen to.
No, it's all ads.
I mean, I can listen to Sirius XM, which I do on the weekends for the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, what they call Soul Town.
Yep.
I listen to The Bridge. I have 6 stations.
Yep.
I listen to actually the Love Station, or it's Yacht Rock during the summer, the 60s, 70s, 80s, what they call The Bridge, and what they call Soul Town.
Right.
So, I mean, I get to listen to my music. Yeah, I mean, there are some songs from the 90s I like, but
Yeah.
that's the weekend. And during the week, I like following, I listen to the politics of the United States, channel number 124 on POTUS, on Sirius, because that's usually fairly down the middle.
Okay.
And I don't want to listen to an extreme either way. So I try to listen to something where it's, some of the people are slightly right, some are left of center, but I do listen to the political stuff, but I want to be balanced. I want to be truly fair and balanced in what I listen to.
Yeah, I think we could all move towards the center more. Well, I say that as a country because it's too competitive right now. And I'm starting to sound political, but we need to find
Right, and that's why I don't talk
ground.
about politics.
Yeah, for
Because,
sure.
you know, sometimes if you bring up stuff and people say it's politics, I say, no, it's fact. I mean,
Right.
I got yelled at when I, and I'll use the, and I don't want to use the yelled at, when I mentioned how cool during the inauguration Topps now did with the Bernie Sanders mittens card.
Yeah.
You know, when everybody was making memes of it.
Yeah.
It wasn't that it was political or that Bernie Sanders is so left of center. It was just so much coolness to see this old guy. He looks like everybody's uncle. You know, and remember, I'm Uncle Rich Klein.
Yeah. And it's pop culture, you know, it's pop
uncle,
culture.
His grandfather just sitting there like this with the mittens. And they sold 99,000 cards.
Amazing.
I mean, for crying out loud, that's a hobby story.
Yeah, I think my son bought maybe 6 of the Faucis, I think.
And the Fauci was until then the biggest one they had before that.
Yeah.
And Fauci, by the way, speaking of sports, was a heck of a basketball, you know, was a really good high school basketball player. He's captain of his high school basketball team.
I imagine a point guard, right?
Correct. How did you ever guess?
I'm going to ask you one more question before my final question. What is your favorite place you've been to? I see your background, but what is your favorite place that you've been to anywhere in the world?
How about my favorite place I haven't been to? And
we can follow that up. That could be.
I came within a day or two of going there.
Okay.
And it's one of these things that I think not going there changed my life and actually set me what ended up on the path of working at Beckett. Was in 1980, we'd been doing the tennis stats at the US Tennis Open. And I had actually gotten the visa, which enabled me to go to Australia.
Oh.
And we were literally on the cusp of getting a contract to do all of us going to Australia to do the US, to do the Australian Tennis Open.
Yeah.
And only one person ended up going in addition to the guy owning the company, instead of like 4 or 5 of us.
And it wasn't you.
But I remember it was literally.
It was there.
The day before, we're still thinking about it. And I always wanted to go to Australia. And I always wanted to go to Hawaii. Those 2 places I still need to go to.
That was your Bill Buckner moment, right?
Right. That was like one of these things where I didn't get to do it. And I think I ended up staying where I was. And I think that actually set me up for being at Beckett the next year, because I went to the 89 National. I had at some event, the first interview, in a sense, it was an informal conversation, but it lasted 25 minutes. It was like an interview with the late Fred Reed, who passed on recently. And Dr. Beckett actually did a tribute to him when he passed recently, because he was like a VP of publishing, which was overseeing the area I was going to be in the price guide. And I did just fine.
Right.
And my other friend, Wes Seaman, who came down to help me from the show from North Dakota, also passed this year. And he told me, when I realized what was going on, I got out of the way when you started talking to him. So, so we knew what was going on. And I think not going there set me up to do the introductory.
All happens for a reason, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then set me up for the next year when Jim expanded the staff for me to do the interview the day after the National, which set me up for the 9 to 17 years full-time and 2 years with contract I did with Beckett. Right. And then the 7 years I spent on the beach working for Bank of America until they outsourced my job. But that's what I mean by you never know, because I would still love to go to Australia.
Right.
But that was just one of those weird things. But in terms of travel, I got to see many parts of the country. And I had some wonderful shows. I had some shows you wonder, why the heck am I here? But I got to go, ComC's office is in Redmond, Washington. When I went out there, that was the corporate office. And the place most of us stay is a place called the Redmond Inn if you go out there to visit.
Yep.
Well, I went on a show trip to Seattle in 1992. It's one of my favorite show trips. It was the weekend and I was staying there. The Redmond Inn opened. I
Oh,
actually,
really?
I actually 25 years later went back to the hotel that I had stayed in when one of my favorite show
Wow.
trips, which was my Seattle show trip in
That's
1992, where
awesome.
I went and saw my first ever minor league game. I drove up to Vancouver for couple card shows on Sunday. I come back. You have to go through customs, and I'm dressed nicely, and
Mhm.
and I went to a card show. And of course the customs agents thinks I'm smuggling drugs in,
Right.
or I'm
Right.
and I told him, dude, I promise you, I spent $2 at the show. Here's what I purchased. I forgot I put a couple cards in the glove compartment, so I actually spent
Uh-huh.
11.
Right.
So I screwed up. So forgive me for not telling the customs agent I spent $10 instead of $2.
I think you're in the clear.
And then he looks at my trunk. He actually examines like all the hidden boards. He goes, "We have a trunk here." And I said, "I'm sorry, sir, but that's what I told you.
Yeah.
I understand you're doing your job, but sometimes you got to believe what people tell you."
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
sort of laughed. He said, "Go back to your hotel."
Well, Vancouver's probably my favorite city in North America. It's gorgeous, and Seattle's not that far
I
behind, obviously.
really enjoyed my 3 hours in Seattle. It's
Yeah.
a beautiful country.
Yeah.
And it was a 2 hour drive. It was actually not bad.
Yeah.
You know, and I did more driving. I was in my 30s. I did some driving. I remember there was an Indianapolis show I went to that wasn't that good. I got the wild hair on me. I finished the show in like a day and a half. And I said, I've got an extra day to kill. I'm going to go to Mattingly's for lunch.
Where's that?
That was in Evansville,
Oh,
Indiana.
Evansville.
2.5
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah.
So I drove
Yeah.
2.5
Yeah.
hours each way to have lunch at Mattingly's.
I didn't know. Was it?
Bought a couple cards. I
Oh,
actually bought
that's
a
so
couple cards
funny.
out of that trip.
Wow.
Because I stopped with Larry Bird's too.
Larry French Lick.
So,
Yeah.
So I had that, and I went to some cool places when I used to go to the Sabre conventions. We went to some, went to a lot of baseball games.
Right.
So I don't want to say I had a favorite place, but I've had a bunch of really nice life experiences and seen a lot of really cool things through all the travel I've done. I haven't done as much travel in recent years, but I got to see some really fun stuff.
Yeah, well, that's great, right? And every closed door means there's another opportunity further down the hallway. You talk about not being able to go to the Australian Open, but look where it led to, right? You might not have had all the subsequent experiences had you made that trip. So
and that was made for me. So that I didn't. That was what I didn't get to make. That.
Yeah, I got you. I'm going to ask you a question here. Test your knowledge. I tested your knowledge a little last weekend with my Louis Aparicio card. You knew the number right off the bat, 71. Louis
number
Aparicio.
740.
Yeah. And I was amazed to see your mind in action in person. Tell me about the number 208 Dave Magadan card, the studio 208 Dave Magadan card.
That I don't remember.
You don't remember? I'm looking here at the 1991, December 91 Beckett issue, this is why I wanted to test you, because apparently they had his birthday down as 1862 instead of 1962.
Oh, cool. Well, I don't remember. I remember I don't have to look for that anymore. And
I know, but it was fun. It's fun seeing you.
And then I like the second iteration I did of errors and variations better than the first iteration.
Okay.
There were so many in those days. You had to do it sort of dryly.
I know, and it's amazing how many times they were screwing up back in those days. This is just
the second iteration. The last 6-7 years I was at Beckett. I get these emails. I guess I came up with a couple stories. It just started I don't want to say flood, but I got a decent amount of emails. And I liked writing those better because I was still tracking errors and variations. So don't get me wrong.
Right.
But I wanted everything. I wanted to feature one card with a backstory.
Okay.
And I loved backstories.
Right.
Again,
it's connecting the dots, right?
It's connecting the dots. One of my favorite stories on that is I did one on 74 Washington National Leaguers, which actually drew like a 5-paragraph response from Keith Olbermann. And one day we're chatting. My editor's, Mike Payne, great editor, is talking about something. Yeah. And I said, yeah. And I want to try to do something more. How about, okay, well, I do have this response I've had for all these years from Keith Olbermann on my 74 Washington National League article, and his eyes lit up like, You never told me about that. We ran it the next month.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
since he wrote it as a letter to me, an
Right.
email to me, it was perfectly permissible
Yeah. Yeah, for
on a
sure.
publishing level
Right.
to do that. It was just the funniest thing was the reaction is, I'm running that. I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
remember all the E's and V's. I mean, some
Uh-huh.
of them I do, some of them I catch.
There's too
I
many.
was because there's just too many of them out
Yeah.
there. But I wrote all those columns, and but as I said, the second iteration was the fun one because I got to
Yeah.
do backstories.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You go a little deeper dive, right? Yeah. I mean, this page you had, a dozen or more, it was Griffey Jr. and Griffey Sr. both had the same numbered card and the same set, right? So
Right, that's like one of the Bowman sets I thought
it's
it
a Bowman
was.
set. Yeah, but it's fun. It's number 246, the Bowman set, the 1991 Bowman set. So yeah, it's neat seeing these. Like I said, I did, along with those Arco Red Sox Arco cards, they're 8x10s, but cards, I found this 91 copy of the Beckett magazine. So it's neat, you know, looking back at that stuff, even in the 90s, to kind of
And
take a
look
look
at the
back in a time
prices of
skip.
some of the key rookies in those days. I mean, look at like
Yeah,
what Ricky Henderson, go to 1980, look at
yeah,
what the
yeah. Let me
price
look
of a
at that.
Ricky Henderson rookie was. I'm just curious.
Yeah, give me a second.
Number
You know,
40,
some of them will still give you nosebleeds. Some of these sets from the 50s, right? So
yeah.
the 80 Ricky, hold on, I'm in the 80 Ricky would have been up. We got a downward arrow too. Buck 60 and
Okay, so it had peaked, it was coming
yeah,
down.
yeah,
It took literally until it probably had been more expensive, but it literally took 30 years for the Henderson to finally totally reverse and get back to its peak
yeah,
price levels of 30 years ago.
yeah, for sure. Because that's the gem of 80, the 1980 set, obviously.
But then you look at things like 78 Eddie Murray, there that really has, and the Molitor Trammel may have moved up slightly.
Yeah, Eddie
And
didn't have a lot
some
of
of those,
competition, that's for
the
sure, right? But
75 Breck was a couple $100, I think, in those days.
yeah, I got it all right here.
That's one of the things where we changed only because there was so much more competition. Those prices came down because those weren't, they're still wonderful cards, but so much other stuff came out.
Yeah,
They
yep.
weren't the cards anymore.
Well, it's one of the interesting things, if you were to, and I did this, if you were to go look at the top 5 cards from all the 70s sets, I'm talking the 4 major sports, baseball was not the thing, right? I thought baseball was everything, but your Maravich obviously in 70, 71 is the big card, your Peyton card, and the Dr. J 72, and then of course the Gretzky in 79. Baseball is kind of lost in there. There were no big hitters in the 70s, baseball wise. There's some years where they're not even in the top 5 of valued cards.
Well, that's because baseball, the Mount Rushmore players don't have rookie cards in the 70s.
Yep, you're right.
But hockey, you talk about, and I'll include 80, 81 so we can get the Bird Magic in there.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You have Mount Rushmore players.
Yeah, it's good
in the other sports in those days.
Yeah.
They also have a later start, but Peyton is definitely a Mount Rushmore player.
Yep.
If you're in Dallas, Roger Staubach is the Mount Rushmore player. And that's a couple $100.
Well, that's the year. The 72 is the one where baseball is not in the top 5. It's got Dr. J, Staubach, Wilt, Phil Jackson, and Kareem are the top 5 cards. And
Kareem's a 69-70 tops rookie, the oversized card. Mm-hmm. Kareem's a Mount Rushmore player. Yep. Dr. J's a Mount Rushmore player. Yep. Gretzky really is a Mount Rushmore player.
Yep.
So we don't have that. I mean, we have great players in the 70s, but name me one of those guys in the 70s that's Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, you're not going to find him. Hank Aaron was winding up his career. Willie Mays was winding up his career. Mickey was gone, obviously, and nobody was. Those players that span the 70s, your guys like Carlton and obviously Seaver and Nolan Ryan. No big debuts for baseball in the 70s other than
great players.
Yeah,
I mean, the closest thing is Michael Jack Smith.
73, yeah, for sure. Yeah, he's actually, you know what? You're right, because that's the only year where baseball, 73 and 75 with the Brett is the only year baseball is on top. Other than that, it's, slim pickings. So you make a great point about Mount Rushmore. Absolutely. So thanks for your time, Rich. I
Oh,
really
thanks for having
appreciate
me,
it.
John. This was a blast.
Tell me what you want to plug, if anything. I don't care if it's the Everly Brothers, whether it's ComC,
Well,
whether it's a show,
well,
whatever.
well, I mean, if you're really into music trivia, we have a really cool Room and Wire Club. So we mentioned that. So I'll just talk about that briefly.
Okay.
In terms of the hobby, I need to do this. I still write for GTS, writing a Klein's Corner column. I've fallen behind for various reasons, including I went through the national, and then it took a while to heal, but I tore my labrum and sprained my
Right.
AC joint. So I'm in massive pain during the national.
Go to your chiropractor. We talked about this.
My
right?
chiropractor did a wonderful job. I saw it. In fact, his name is Trace Alexander. I see him. I'm still screaming in pain, putting out my nightshirts. I'm on my fourth treatment. He says, by the way, after next week, you won't have to see me anymore.
Yeah.
Well, I see him for my arthritis treatment.
Right.
And I said, you're out of your mind. A week later, I go, by the way, I said, if I didn't have the show this weekend and didn't have to want to follow up with you, you'd be absolutely right. I don't have to see you anymore. So I'll give him a plug. But, obviously I'm at ComC, so we plug ComC. We've done a great job. We're catching up on everything. We're going, even our shipping is doing better than it was. So we're really having a good story to tell now. It's, the worst, knock on wood, with COVID is over. We have a good story to tell. And I also do these podcasts with Dr. Beckett. You came to the dinner. He's run, I think, the first two of our conversation, of our tape things. And hey, I still have the Chick-fil-A in my refrigerator. I still have a couple sandwiches. So
you didn't make off with the cookies, though. You should have taken the cookies.
No. I'm trying to keep my weight at a reasonable level. The cookies were really good, by the way.
They were good. Yeah.
So, but I do a bunch of podcasts. I'm with his Bob Euchre, his Ed McMahon. I do 4 to 5 a month. And sometimes we count these two. So you might hear me 5, 6, 7 times a month on his podcast. And usually about once a month, I'm on Hobby Hotline. I was actually on twice in August, but not the one I was scheduled for, because Kyle had his airport show the weekend I was scheduled.
Right.
In fact, I'll be on Hobby Hotline this Saturday at 11 Eastern, 10 Central. And it covers the news, it covers modern topics. And, strangely enough, even though the big Fanatics news has several weeks now, there's still reverberations from that going on. And there's other news too. So we cover the news. People do call in. We look at the chat for what's going on. So I do that. And I'm guests on other podcasts, including yours, or webcasts, or whatever you do. So
yeah, well, you're going to be my debut YouTube video, so you'll be on the podcast. But I'm gonna put this on YouTube. It'll be awesome, and so you're helping me break that seal, and you're bringing me into the modern days. So I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you having me. I'm glad we did this. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
We went an hour and a half, and I could probably do another hour if I really.
Who cares?
But I think my wife and my 2 dogs might want me at home.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm with you. Listen, thanks, Rich. I look forward to seeing you again. Hopefully, I'll see you in the fall at one of these shows. So thanks for your hospitality. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, buddy. I'll talk to you later.
All right, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Rich, thank you. We'll talk to you.
Thanks, John.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.